The soldier who didn't know World War II ended. Why are you guys typing he hid for 30 years?
Back in 1974, a Japanese college dropout named Norio Suzuki heard a
Okay.
rumor. Apparently, on a lone island in the Philippines, far out in the dense jungle, was a Japanese soldier, a lieutenant no less, who'd been there since the end of World War II. That's almost
Oh shit.
29 years at this point, refusing to surrender. Initially, Norio brushed this
He had to keep his pride.
off as a hoax. If he'd been missing for that long, he must have been declared dead. Plus, there was no way someone could survive out in the jungle for that long. However, he did some
Yeah, there could, but you could just. You're telling me you couldn't just kill animals and just drink like random. Actually, no. What? How would you be able to drink water in the forest? There's no clean water in the forest, right? Unless you're on like a coconut beach and there's like coconuts and water. I don't even know what I'm saying. But yeah, how do you get clean water? What the hell?
research. The lieutenant, by the name of Hiro Onoda, had been missing since the war ended in 1945 and declared dead in 1959. That was
Okay.
odd. It was a suspiciously long time to wait to declare someone dead.
He faked his
So,
death.
He must have been seen alive at some point, and if he'd survived that long, what was to say he wasn't still there? Inspired by this wild legend, he decided to take matters into his own hands and embarked on a daring adventure to find the lost soldier and bring him home. But it wouldn't be that easy, not by a long shot. So get ready, because we're about to take one.
You're telling me you really went out all this way just to search for one dude you don't even know? Like I see if this was like his father or like cousin or a family member, right? This guy went out in a boat of river to go to like some random forest to find a dude to see if he was even alive.
One heck of a
Okay?
deep dive into the story of a man who fought for nearly 29 years after World War II had ended. We need to begin, we need to meet the mysterious man, Hiro Onoda. Hiro
Hiro
was
Onoda.
born in 1922 in the
Damn.
town of Kainan, in Japan's Wakayama Prefecture. He grew up in a bustling family as the fifth of 7 children, and later embarked on a career as a salesman for a Japanese company operating in China. But
Okay.
destiny had other plans for him.
You
And
better get in your
eventually
military,
everything
boy.
changed on December 7th,
In that military.
1941. History buffs might recognize that date. It's the day when the Japanese Imperial Forces attacked the United States naval base of Pearl Harbor. This was a world-shattering event that altered the course of the
Yeah.
Second World War.
Wait, wasn't this around the time also the Hiroshima bomb got dropped?
It was a catastrophic
Or was that 1955? I don't know.
event that would lead to the U.S. declaring war on Japan, embroiling the two countries
Oh, yeah.
in conflict.
Right now,
Following
yeah,
this,
that's what
all
happened.
able-bodied men aged 17 to 40 in Japan were drafted for the army. In
Hey, that's what's about to happen to y'all in America. Y'all about to get drafted too. Have fun with that.
May
I'm in Canada. I'm chilling.
1942, Hiro was called up for his Army physical, passing it with flying colors. So,
Okay.
at the tender
He was-
age
he
of
was a
20
Don.
years
He was a
old,
Don.
he was inducted into the 61st Infantry Regiment in Wakayama, before being assigned to the 218th Infantry Regiment. His first orders? To head to the war front in Nanchang, China. But in December 1944, American forces landed in San Jose in the Philippines. The Japanese soldiers were immediately relocated to fight against them, with Hiro's
Okay.
regiment ordered to defend Lubang.
Holy shit, this is like a full history lesson. This is great.
Small, narrow.
My history
island,
teacher could
barely
never make it this
14
entertaining.
Square miles in size, forming part of the Philippines archipelago. As the American invasion escalated, Hiro received a battlefield promotion to a full-fledged second lieutenant by
Oh,
January 10th,
shit.
1945. Then he received a set of orders that would change his life forever. Major Takahashi said, "Apprentice Officer Onoda will proceed to Lubang Island, where he will lead the Lubang garrison in guerrilla warfare."
And let me guess, this is where he hid for 30 years or whatever you guys are typing in the comments. Well, it was in the thumbnail too, but he hid for 30 years on this island after the war ended.
It was a huge
Probably happened.
responsibility, one that Hiro was keen to undertake. But then General Akira Muto, Chief of Staff of the 14th Area Army, delivered a haunting message that echoed in Hiro's ears. "You are absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, it may take 5,
What?
but whatever happens, we will come back for you."
You are forbidden to die by your own hands. So you are forbidden from yourself. But when I do that to myself, you're not gonna catch me. I'm gonna be dead.
As a newly appointed lieutenant given direct orders from a general, these words were burned into Hiro's mind. He swore an oath to fight the
Why?
war till the bitter end. But despite his conviction, he didn't have the confidence of his fellow
Oh,
soldiers.
type shit. He swore like type shit. I
Being
guess.
such a young soldier in command, Hiro still had a lot to prove. And boy, would he be put to the test. On February
Yes,
28th, a
sir.
force of 50 American soldiers landed on Lubang Island.
Oh
A
no.
battalion of Marines led by
Oh
4
no.
tanks put boots down in the small town of Tillich. And in the
Don't tell
battle
me
that
they killed
ensued,
all of his
the
friends.
town was
His whole
completely
army, and he was
wiped
only the
out,
only
with
one
the
left.
American forces immediately overwhelming the Japanese troops. To protect his unit, Hiro ordered a retreat into the mountains, changing their
Okay.
strategy to that of guerrilla warfare. Despite the name, this didn't mean all the soldiers put on monkey suits. Rather, a guerrilla campaign is the type of warfare where smaller groups of soldiers attack larger armies by relying on sabotage, surprise ambushes, and hit-and-run
Okay.
tactics.
Type
Hiro
shit.
knew it wouldn't
You
be
sneak
safe for
'em.
all the soldiers to remain in the same place, as they'd be sitting ducks if they became surrounded by the Americans. And so, the soldiers splintered into 3-man cells. It meant 2 soldiers could stand guard facing either direction, while the 3rd soldier prepared meals and set up camp. Hiro's 3-man cell was joined by Corporal
Yeah, this guy really is a captain, bro. Holy shit, this guy's the whole planned out everything. I wonder if they killed all the American soldiers. I go by this plan. Let me see.
Shimada and Private Kozuka. They were later joined by Private Akatsu, a sickly young soldier who'd been iced out from his cell. The men continued to carry out guerrilla warfare against the American forces over the summer of 1945. Held in the dense, jungle-thick mountains, these 3-man cells were completely cut off from the Central Military Command, which is why they were unaware of the catastrophic events that unfolded
Yeah.
on the 6th of
It was
August.
1945. The Hiroshima bomb dropped. 1955. That's L. That's L history knowledge by me.
1945. It was a day the world would never forget. The Americans dropped the first atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. The bomb annihilated the city, completely destroying some 60,000 structures and ending the lives of some 66,000 people.
Damn,
3
bro.
days later, the Americans dropped the second atomic bomb
War
on the
is
city of
fucked up, bro.
Nagasaki, razing it to the ground and wiping a further 69,000 people off the face of the earth. Following this apocalyptic demonstration of power, Japan admitted defeat. The official surrender
bro.
of Japan was
What else you gonna do, bro? Damn, yo, saying America has been dominating countries for like hundreds of years. You guys have always been on top, bro. Damn.
announced by Emperor Hirohito on the 15th of
Oh, I know this guy. I know this guy. Wait, I know this dude. Remember, he was in the video. He was in the video of the torturing people video. He was like a commander for torturing or like some weird shit. No, I could be wrong, but fuck this dude.
August and formally signed on the 2nd of September 1945, bringing the horrendous war
I could be wrong. So you know, I'm not gonna say fuck that dude completely, but if it's true, that dude's a weirdo.
to a close. Orders were delivered through Central Command, passing on that Japan had surrendered, and all soldiers were to stand down. Though it took longer for the news to reach further areas of the war front, such as the Philippines. There weren't iPhones or internet access back in those days, just telegrams, letters, and word of mouth. With that in mind, it was the middle of October when news of the surrender finally reached Lubang. A squad of Japanese soldiers had encountered a group of local islanders who'd immediately fled in terror, but one of them left behind a piece of paper. Printed on it in Japanese was a statement that read, "The war ended on August 15th. Come down from the mountains." The soldiers dismissed it.
Oh hell no! Yeah. That look, he seems like a trap. The American soldiers are still on the island, right? Yeah, you come down, you're getting shot up. Your whole team's done for.
As a
Be a good leader and don't go down.
ruse from the islanders to force them to evacuate the island. Meanwhile, they still heard
What
distant
do you
from
do?
the island come down from the mountains. The soldiers dismissed it as a ruse
Dismissed it.
from the islanders to force
shit.
them to evacuate the
Gotta be a
island.
leader.
Meanwhile, they still heard distant gunshots and remained steadfast in
Exactly,
their belief
bro.
that the Americans were attempting to lure them out. As
Free
the year
attempt.
drew to a close, a Boeing B-17 flew over their hideout, dropping a bundle of papers. These were prints of the official surrender order from General Yamashita of the 14th Area Army.
Oh
But the
yeah,
sol-
wait, they surrendered. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the Americans wouldn't kill the Japanese people, but yo, either way, I'd still be shook. Like we were just fighting, just because your country surrendered. Like I don't know, you might actually still try to kill me. I'd be shook. I'd be scared.
soldiers scrutinized every detail, filled with skepticism. The leaflet said that any soldiers who surrendered would be rewarded with hygienic succor and hauled to Japan. Now,
What?
succor, which means to give assistance or aid, was a word typically used at this time when liberating prisoners of war. To the active
Okay.
soldiers, this seemed incredibly suspicious. But what troubled Hiro the most was the mention of a, quote, direct imperial order in General Yamashita's command. He had never heard of such an order, and the grammar of the text suggested that the general was issuing the order to himself. Something didn't add up. With doubt
Okay.
clouding their minds, the soldiers concluded that the leaflets were clever forgeries by the Americans. It would later transpire
I do not blame these guys for thinking this. I would any smart, capable human would think the same thing. Or not, you don't even need to be smart. You just need to have a little bit of brain cells to figure out that might be a trap.
that the pamphlet's error was a simple printing mistake, but it was too late. The soldiers remained vigilant and unwavering in their fight for Japan. As their
W.
guerrilla campaign dragged on, supplies began to dwindle, and the men were starting to get hungry. All groups had begun with a 3-month supply of rice, which Hiro's cell had carefully rationed to last as long as possible. But by March, the other soldiers had run out. They came to Hiro's camp and begged for rice, but the tough lieutenant refused. He gave them all the same answer. You men made pigs of yourselves when you had rice, so now you don't have any.
Facts.
If we
Hey, now you gotta start hunting spider meat and freaking deers, or I don't even know what kind of forest you're in if there is deer or whatever. You just eat whatever you can find, bro.
give you rice, we'll all be in trouble. You don't know how to conserve.
Yeah.
Now, if there's something that makes us feel weak-willed, it's hunger. And with all that constant clamoring through the jungle, you can imagine how hungry the soldiers were.
Wait, but how do they get clean water though? That's the thing. You can't just drink water from the lake. That's salt water. It's like a bunch of viruses in there and like bullshit. You know what I mean? How do you get clean water? Like how are you gonna get clean water? I'm actually curious. I don't know.
As more leaflets urging surrender rained down from above, the hungry and homesick soldiers found themselves teetering on the edge.
Oh no.
Finally, in April 1946, 41 of the 3-man cells gave in and surrendered. Hero's
Really?
4-man cell, however,
What?
the 3-man cells
I mean, yeah, low key. If I couldn't find any food, and I just knew I was gonna die, and my other teammates were preserving their rice, like rightfully so, because they weren't idiots with their food. Yeah, I probably would surrender too.
gave in and surrendered. Hero's 4-man cell, however, stood their ground and
Woo!
refused to give up on Japan. As the days and weeks
True soldiers wouldn't give up on their country for $1 million. Doesn't matter, bro. They're not giving up on their country. They're not giving up on their will. Let's go.
wore on, the Japanese troops who had surrendered began leaving notes out that read, "Nobody is searching for you now but the Japanese. Come on out." But these 4 soldiers still refused to accept the war had really ended, and more
See, I wouldn't like not look at the notes because of the war ending. I would not look at it because they might be a trap. That's what I would think. Not just the fact that I couldn't believe Japan losing a war or my country losing a war. It would just be the fact of it being a trap. I just couldn't.
importantly, that Japan had lost. Instead, they chose to believe the surrendered Japanese soldiers were actually captured prisoners of war,
Captured,
and that the
yeah.
Americans were forcing them
Facts.
to lure out Hero's
Facts,
cell. With that in
facts,
mind,
like I said.
every time the searchers called out for Hero's team, the cell quickly relocated. Still, the leaflets left a deep impression on Private.
Damn, these guys actually hid. These guys dead ass hid for 30 years. You're telling me these guys have been on the island for years and they haven't found these guys? I don't know how big this island is, but these guys are. The FBI couldn't even catch them. Holy.
Katsu, who, at just 22 years old, was the youngest member of the cell. One evening after they had finished their meal, he raised the all-important question: what if the war really had ended? All eyes turned toward the lieutenant. Rising to the occasion, Hiro made a bold statement. "If that's what you all truly think,
You
I'll
can
go and
go.
check," he said.
Oh,
But
oh.
then Private Kozuka suddenly intervened. He reminded them of the strange pamphlet they had received, referencing the Direct Imperial Order. He convinced them that the other soldiers had fallen into the Americans' trap, taken
Yeah.
prisoner by believing in that forged letter. This was enough to sway their view, and they refused to bear responsibility for those other soldiers who they believed had been captured. The four of them vowed to keep on fighting. It was now mid-April in 1946.
These guys don't quit. Determination of a Don, boy. Holy.
And little did they know, but these four men were the last remnants of Japanese resistance in the Philippines. After the main bulk of the Japanese contingent had surrendered, the islanders on Lubang began to feel more at ease venturing into the mountains to cut timber. Meanwhile, whenever Hero's squad, which was always on high alert, heard them coming, they'd hide in the bushes like ninjas. They considered the islanders enemies because when the American forces had initially landed, swiftly sided with them.
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
Because
whoa,
when the
whoa, whoa.
American forces had initially landed.
Okay, I don't think this is footage from 1950 because this guy looks a little too big to be a soldier. See, this is the 1950. It's not 2000 like 26. You cannot have this level of obesity on the floor. I don't think it's probably not footage from 1955.
Swiftly sided with them, turning against the occupying Japanese force. These islanders had acted as guides for the enemy, so now the cell avoided them at all costs. But luck wasn't always on their side, and sometimes they were spotted. When that happened, there was only one option left: shoot at the islanders to scare them.
Oh no, no, because then they could just be killing innocent people and they wouldn't even know it.
Off. It was all they could think to do to protect their secret hideout from being discovered by the people they thought were the enemy. The soldiers were living in their own version of reality. You have to feel bad for
This
them.
kind of reminds me of that. What's that one island in India? North Sentinel Island. That's kind of like what they were doing, bro. North Sentinel Island is still, those people still haven't been picked up or anything. They still live like we're back in the freaking like first 100 years of life. You know what I mean? They're in the forest. They're gathering food. They just been on it 24/7, and we haven't been able to get them because they just kill everybody who goes on their island. Well, either way, even if we met them, I know it's off topic, but even if we met them, like they would die because like there's so many diseases that we have that they couldn't incorporate, and their bodies couldn't incorporate, and they would just die.
Islanders, who had to constantly deal with the aggressive tactics of Hero's squad. But being shot at was just the start of the problems. They also had their food stolen too. When the islanders went up into the mountains to work, they often brought along bags of uncooked
Oh
rice.
no!
They'd hang the sacks from trees and leave them behind after finishing work to use the
Stained.
next day. But little did they know, there were very hungry soldiers hiding in the jungle. Hero's squad would steal the rice like bandits in the night, but these meager portions of rice alone weren't enough to sustain them. Fortunately, Lubang had an abundance of flora and fauna the soldiers could hunt and scavenge.
Oh, okay.
The tropical climate meant that one fruit was found, quite literally, by the bunch: bananas. Lubang was also a wildlife paradise, with wild water buffaloes, wild boars, wild chickens, and even iguanas.
Okay, I don't know what the hell this shit is in the bottom right. I'm not eating that. I'm good. I'd rather starve to death. But eating like some fucking Komodo dragon lizard looking thing, I'm good. I'm alright.
Could grow up to a whopping 3 feet in length. Lizard meat doesn't exactly sound appetizing, and hunting wild animals with what precious little ammunition they had seemed like a huge waste, which is exactly why the soldiers focused their attention instead on the cows the islanders raised for meat.
The
They
cows.
justified this hunting as taking resources from the enemy.
Yo, but the thing is, actually, no, never mind. I was gonna say the thing is that I think the islanders would be able to hear a cow in the distance and know it's been stolen. But the thing is, there's so many cows on the island. Like it's not a pet, bro. You're not gonna figure out. No, this cow's mine. This cow's mine. No, you're
It
not.
was bad news for the islanders and the cows. But from this bare sustenance, the soldiers continued to struggle for survival. To truly grasp the unique situation,
But to be fair, after 10 years, I would think that the freaking the Americans wouldn't be looking for me anymore, and the Islanders are just the Islanders. Or worst case scenario, I'd kidnap one of the Islanders and I'd make him tell me everything, and I hold him at gunpoint. You know what I mean? Not Just to make sure everything I know is right. Because once he's at gunpoint, he's gonna tell me the truth, most likely.
these holdout soldiers found themselves in, we need to understand the lay of the land on Lubang. The population of the entire island was only 12,000, mostly consisting of farmers that resided in the north of the island. So Hero's Cell focused their movements around the less populated and jungle-covered mountains in the south. They developed a circuit, a rough ellipse moving counterclockwise through the region. They wouldn't stay at a camp location for more than 3 to 5 days, as they were riddled with paranoia, convinced the enemy troops could appear at any moment. Living in such a remote area, isolated
Bro, they
from the
weren't
outside
thinking, bro. Just
world,
kidnap one of the
strictly
islanders and ask him
following their
questions.
routine, the soldiers slowly brainwashed themselves into the belief that the war was still raging on,
Holy.
though one soldier remained skeptical. You see, Private Akatsu was never as convinced as the others that Japan was still at war. 3 times he abandoned the group and disappeared into the jungle, only to be brought back by Corporal Shimada. But then, one day in September 1949, 4 years and 210 days since the war had ended, Private Akatsu vanished. The other soldiers feared the worst, that he had been captured by American troops, but they were in for a surprise. In 1950, more than 6 months later, they stumbled upon a leaflet that revealed the shocking truth. Private Akatsu had surrendered to the Filipino troops in March after spending 6 months on his own, at a location on the other side of the island. A note was attached with Private Akatsu's handwriting, saying that when he eventually decided to surrender, the Filipino troops greeted him as a friend rather than an enemy.
Let's
Surely
go!
that was enough evidence to convince them the war was over.
Don't tell me this guy thought this shit was a trap too, bro. This guy, he has too many survival instincts. Way too many survival instincts, bro. Just believe something in your life, please.
But as they were pondering the private's surrender, they spotted a mysterious aircraft circling above them. Assuming this must all be part of an enemy trap, they quickly moved on. So, instead of casting doubt, Private Akatsu's departure sent the group's paranoia levels through the roof. They started seeing all islanders as spies in disguise. At this point, you might have assumed that the Japanese authorities had given up trying to search for them, but their efforts continued. In February 1952, 7 years after the war had ended, another plane dropped leaflets into the jungle, and among them was a letter from Hiro's oldest brother, Toshio. The letter stated that the war had ended, and that his brothers were all out of the army. There was also a letter from Private Kozuka's and Corporal Shimada's families, together with photographs. Compelling evidence, right? Nope, the soldiers dismissed them as another enemy.
What, you thought this shit was AI generated? It's 1952, bro. There's no AI. You saw your... see, okay, they're starting to piss me off. They're
hoax. They believed the
they're not
photos
getting
were fabricated as a clever trap by the Americans. How? Well, Corporal Shimada's family was stood in front of a house that he didn't recognize, indicating the photos were fake. Little did the men know, though, that Tokyo had been extensively firebombed during the war, and most of the city had needed to be rebuilt. So they still refused to believe Japan had lost, and instead, they let their imaginations run wild with theories on how the Americans forged the photographs. This would have been a lot harder over 70 years ago, because Photoshop didn't even exist. Ironically, the various leaflets and messages sent to them saying that the war was over only served to further entrench their conspiracies. Living in the humid jungle for so long, though, their uniforms were now beginning to rot. To patch the holes, they used thread from fibers of a hemp-like plant that grows in the forest and cut pieces of canvas off their tent for patches. Luckily, there was no malaria.
How do you shower? Okay, I guess you're not worried about showering, or like the way you shower, you just like jump in the lake or some shit.
On Lubang, and being isolated from the main population of the island, they rarely got sick. They kept track of the calendar by memory and counting rations. They took care of their military-issued swords and guns by polishing them with palm oil, to keep them from rusting. But gradually, the gun butts and slings absorbed so much palm oil that the giant jungle rats would sniff them out and gnaw at them.
Holy.
They also stole materials from the islanders, including clothes. They raided the islanders' houses for coffee and canned goods. Unsurprisingly, the islanders became increasingly hostile towards the soldiers and tried various methods to flush them out. Some of the wackier ideas included leaving dirty cartoons or nude photos of women in the mountains to entice them to reveal their location. But rampant paranoia overwhelmed any desires they had.
Holy shit, you imagine just gooning? You imagine gooning through a freaking binoculars? Oh! Oh!
By this point,
What?
and the soldiers steered clear. Eventually, sick of being taken advantage of, the islanders began fighting back.
Really?
In June 1953, Corporal Shimada was wounded badly in the leg after being shot at by a local fisherman.
No.
Then, in a heartbreaking turn of events just a year later, Corporal Shimada was accidentally shot and killed by a Philippine Army mountain unit during their training. While accidental, the cell saw it as the enemy closing
Holy
in,
shit.
fueling them further into their wartime delusion. Just 10 days after Corporal Shimada's untimely demise, a Philippine Air Force plane made several passes over their location. It dropped more leaflets, and a loudspeaker blared out, "Onada, Kazuka, the war has ended." You'd think this would be the moment of truth. The revelation would get the message through, but no. Enraged over Corporal Shimada's
There's only
death,
two of
it
them
only
left.
hardened their desire for revenge. They saw it as yet another cunning ploy by the Americans to lure them out of hiding. At this
Holy
point, I'm
shit.
not sure if these guys
Least gullible people on the planet of the face of the earth, bro. You couldn't. You couldn't get these guys to believe anything. You couldn't.
were staunchly patriotic or straight up crazy. Either way, I guess spending nearly a decade in the jungle will do that to you. But they weren't the only ones being impossibly stubborn, as the Japanese government, true to General Muto's words, refused to give up on them. In 1959, the now two-man cell found themselves faced with yet another attempt to lure them out, but this time it was in the form of a large
There's three of them? I thought there was two of them left. Okay, there's three.
search party. Loudspeakers were set up, with the party saying, "Lieutenant Onoda, Private First Class
Oh, okay.
Kozuka, the war has
There is
ended."
two of them.
They also
I'm
played the
tripping.
Japanese national anthem and a lot of old Japanese folk songs the two recognized. The search party went around the whole island. Every time they came near them, however, the two trekked back further into the jungle, still convinced this was a trick.
This island must be massive, bro.
The search party stayed for an unbelievable 6 months, from May until late November. That's some serious commitment. But no matter what the search party did, the two remained hidden. On the last day of the search, however, something extraordinary happened. Hiro heard a voice over the loudspeaker saying, "Hiro, come out. This is your brother Toshio." And immediately he recognized the voice.
Oh.
It was his brother's. Now, you'd think this is the moment he'd finally come out of hiding, right? He knows his brother, he trusts his brother, there's no voice-changing technology available yet, so this has to be him, right? There could be no doubt in Hiro's mind, right? Right? Unbelievably, Hiro convinced himself that this was just a prisoner sent to imitate his brother
Holy
perfectly. Talk about hearing what you want to believe. But that's not all.
I mean, I guess, bro. Yo, if you leave me 10 years in the forest, I'm really gonna go insane. I wouldn't even. Like, you guys ought to also realize mentally what this does to you. You're not gonna be the regular human you are, bro. You're gonna start seeing shit. You're really gonna you're gonna lose concept of reality, bro.
They wrapped up the search. The party left behind something that could have shattered their beliefs once and for all. Japanese newspapers. It was the first real up-to-date news the cell had seen in some 15 years. But instead of accepting the truth, their paranoia reigned supreme. The enemy had obviously infiltrated these newspapers, doctoring articles to deceive them because none of the articles contained reference to the East Asia co-prosperity sphere. What? You've probably never heard of it, but it was an idea cooked up by the Empire of Japan, in which Japan would essentially be the central power in Asia, with all other countries surrounding it as vassal states. Unsurprisingly, this was an idea hated by every other country in Asia, and when Japan lost World War II, they were forced to abandon it. But to Hiro and
They
Private
thought they were.
Kozuka again, the idea of Japan losing the war was impossible. So, the sphere must exist. They believed that if Japan had truly lost, there would be no news delivered, because the entire population would have been wiped out.
It's a morbid thought, but it gives us a glimpse into the extreme.
Okay, so if they won, right? Okay, if they won, that means you can just go back home and it's like it's all good. You know what I mean? But you're thinking there's no way they lost, so you think the war is just still going on, bro.
Nation these soldiers experienced through wartime propaganda.
For some context, when Hiro arrived in the Philippines in 1944, Japan was already losing the war. But in the homeland, the propaganda slogans being repeated were 100 million souls dying for honor. So it was established that the entire population of Japan would rather perish before surrendering. Hiro took this literally and sincerely believed that Japan would not surrender so long as even one Japanese person remained alive. Both Hiro and Private Kozuka believed it was their duty to hold out until the East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere rescued them. The fact that none of the Japanese newspapers even mentioned it convinced the two men that these were deliberately faked by the Americans, a classic conspiracy loophole of circular thought. It's astounding.
Oh, they made a movie on that? 10,000 Nights in Junk. Is that the movie? That's crazy.
To think
That's
that
good.
even in the face of overwhelming evidence, they clung to their beliefs so rigidly. What Hiro had done was effectively create a mental prison that kept him trapped in his delusional world.
Yeah, bro.
As Hiro and Private Kozuka held on to their conspiracies, they continued their guerrilla tactics. They conducted what they called fire raids, setting ablaze piles of rice harvested by the islanders. They saw these
Why would you put it on fire? You want
fires as beacons.
Why would you put it on fire? Don't these guys need food? They've been hiding for 30 years.
Signaling their
much food do you
presence
have?
and dedication to their duties as the Onada Squadron. It was all
Like at this point, these guys are just criminals because they're just freaking abusing the islanders and the villagers, bro.
in the hopes of clearing the way for the Japanese landing party they believed would soon arrive. However, their actions did not go unnoticed. The islanders, who had turned from tolerating them to hating them by this point, reported these raids to the local police, labeling them as mountain devils, fueling the tension between them. Following the war, living conditions gradually began to improve on the island, and the soldiers observed as many of the villages were lit up with electric lights. And then, in late 1965, something remarkable happened. They managed to steal a transistor radio. Finally, they had a way to hear news straight from the horse's mouth. News on how the war was advancing, on how much Japan had claimed, and how close they were to winning. But what they heard instead on the news was foreign relations with America, that space flight was being tested, that the Philippines had a new president. There was no news of the war at all. It was as if it wasn't even going on. Surely this was the last straw. This must have been what got them to see the light.
Please.
Nope. They dismissed any news.
Oh! They're so stupid. I mean, I'm calling them stupid at this point. They're stupid. They're fucking dumb.
As American propaganda. They continued resisting. Sadly, this would come at another grave cost. When tensions between the islanders and soldiers escalated to a boiling point on October 19th, 1972.
They killed them.
As the pair were once again burning the islanders' rice, the local Philippine police force were called. Shots were fired, and in the chaos, Private Kozuka was killed. It was a devastating blow that left Hiro all alone, surrounded by the consequences of his misguided actions. Nevertheless, he continued his one-man patrol around the island, disguised in camouflage, unable to break out of his strict military routine. Just 3 days after Private Kozuka's death, another search party was dispatched. Once again, the search party left newspapers behind, hoping to catch Hiro's attention. But mistakes in the reporting cast doubt in his mind. Though they'd reported Private Kozuka's death, none of the articles mentioned Private Kozuka's cherished 1,000-stitch waistband, a special cloth where family and friends sewed stitches for good luck. To leave out such an important
Okay.
detail to Hiro led him to believe that the
Yeah, bro.
newspaper
This guy's busy eating fucking lizard meat. All right, bro. I'm surrendering. Let's go. I'm not even surrendering because there's no war going on. But I'm not eating no lizard meat, bro.
had been tampered with, fueling his suspicion of a larger conspiracy at play. With his unwavering belief in the righteousness of Japan's cause, Hiro clung to the notion that the Philippines would switch sides from America to Japan. He convinced himself that staying on Lubang Island, fighting for Japan with his sword in hand, would serve the greater good for his country. And so, he continued hiding in the jungle, waiting for an
for 30
imaginary
years.
secret agent to contact him. But his family never gave up searching for him. In the following 6 months, 3 Japanese search parties attempted to persuade Hiro to surrender. But still, concealed in camouflage, they were unable to ever spot Hiro hiding in the dense jungle.
This guy's a literal ninja, though. He, like, the amount of search parties, the amount of people looking for him, he was never found. This guy is the ultimate, like, hide. Never play hide and go seek with this guy ever again, bro. Please. You will never win.
And one day, something changed. Hiro believed his family was being forced to do this by the Americans in some sort of twisted power play. He couldn't bear to not at least make contact with them. In a moment of weakness, he wrote out a thank you note for some gifts they'd left, leaving it behind in the same spot. This at least established that he was alive and cemented him as a legend in Japan. It was at this point that Hiro's story captivated the interest of Norio Suzuki, the college dropout who, in 1974, traveled all the way to the Philippines on a whim to find the long-lost lieutenant.
Holy.
And by some stroke of luck, he achieved what the rescue parties had been trying to do for almost 29 years in just 4 days. Norio had set up a camp in the jungle all on his own when all of a sudden, Hiro just walked up to him. He immediately recognized that Norio wasn't an islander. How? He was wearing a thick woolen socks with rubber sandals, something the islanders never did. Norio also spoke in a polite Japanese dialect, which is perhaps what convinced Hiro to stay and talk with Norio for over 2 hours. After being totally alone for several months, he seemed desperate for company. Norio carefully and gently broke the news to Hiro that Japan had in fact lost the war and had been at peace for years. Only then, looking into the eyes of another man, did it slowly dawn on Hiro that everything he had dismissed for years as the enemy propaganda was actually the truth. That meant he had been fighting for over 10,000 days on the island for nothing,
For no
still
reason.
unable to fully comprehend what he was
I'd be pissed. I just wish it 30 years of my life, 30 years of my prime. I mean, you usually have a great story to tell, but 30 years of my prime life for just a delusion, I'd be furious.
hearing. When Norio asked what it would take for Hiro to finally leave the jungle, he replied, a direct order from his superior officer to stand down. The old major had long since retired from the army and was now a book dealer living in Miyazaki Prefecture. But Norio promised Hiro he would bring the retired major to the Philippines. To prove that he had indeed found Hiro, they took several photos together, side by side. And as promised, 2 weeks later, the long-awaited reunion happened. The major greeted Hiro and read out his final order. The 14th Area Army has ceased all combat activity. And just like that, after fighting for more than 29 years, Lieutenant Hiro Onoda's war was finally over. He was reunited with his oldest brother Toshio before being escorted to Manila, where President Marcos addressed Hiro for the serious crimes he'd unwittingly committed during his time believed he was still in combat. Technically, all his actions were acts of terrorism, but the president generously pardoned him. He was warmly welcomed
because
as
he
a
didn't know. He didn't know. So I could see why.
war hero when he returned to Japan, which may seem strange considering how long he spent in his crazy conspiracy delusion. But in Japanese culture, there's a deep admiration for heroes who remain loyal to a cause, especially when it seems lost or hopeless. And so, Lieutenant Onoda was celebrated like one of those ancient heroes, a modern-day samurai of sorts.
You can't knock his loyalty,
his
bro.
homecoming
You
was
can't.
nothing short of spectacular. Roaring crowds, celebratory parades, and speeches by public officials. It was a true hero's welcome. Japan could finally celebrate something from the war after their devastating losses, as the lost soldier finally returned. But now, Hiro found himself in a strange and unfamiliar land.
Type shit.
Japan had
He's
been
dead now, though,
dramatically
for sure,
modernized over the 30 years he'd been missing, and while he tried to return to a normal life, things just weren't the same.
Yeah.
So he embarked on a whole new adventure. In 1975, Hiro packed his bags and moved to a Japanese colony in Sao Paulo, Brazil, to assist his brother who owned a farm there.
Yeah.
Who would have thought this once super stubborn soldier would become a cattle rancher, of all things?
Hey, he loves the
This
forest, bro.
story
He's
is
been there
full
for so
of
long.
bizarre twists. Later, in 1984, Hiro found love and tied the knot with Machi Onuku,
Ooh, he got married at like 68. It's never too late to get married, bro. It's never too late to find love.
a Japanese tea ceremony teacher. Together, the pair returned to Japan and founded the Onoda Nature School, a camp where kids learned survival skills. Then, in 1996, Hiro made a pilgrimage back to Luban, and as a gesture of appreciation, donated $10,000 to a local school there.
Nice.
And finally, on January 16th, 2014, after a life filled with adventure,
Yeah.
Hiro Onoda passed away at the remarkable age of 91. Now
91.
that is one heck of a life story.
That is a life. And that was a great video, bro. I guess he truly did hide for 30 years. Anyways, if you guys liked that video, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.